Good morning, Facebook friends. Helen Archontou here, CEO of the YWCA of Northern New Jersey. So glad to have some time with you today on this Wednesday. And in case you don't know, today is Equal Pay Day. This is a day that was originated back in 1996 by the National Committee on Pay Equity. And it's a public awareness event that is used to illustrate the gaps between men and women's wages. And we have throughout the year, as you know, those of you who've been watching us, that different times of the year, we put a focus on Latina Equal Pay Day or Pay Day for Black women and different conversations. So we have been talking about these issues throughout the year. But today we're very excited to be talking with Yana Rodgers. She is our guest this morning, and we will be talking about the impact that this pay gap has on women, especially BIPOC women, and strategies on how to close the gap to create a more balanced society. And before we jump into the conversation, which I know I'm eager to get to, I want to tell you a little bit about Yana Rodgers. And again, we're so grateful that she could make the time to be with us this morning. She is a professor in the Department of Labor Studies and Employment Relations and in the Department of Women and Gender Studies at Rutgers University. And she also serves as the faculty director of the Center for Women and Work at Rutgers. She specializes in utilizing quantitative methods and large data sets to conduct research on women's health, labor market status, and well-being. She's worked regularly as a consultant of the World Bank, United Nations, and the Asian Development Bank, and she was president of the International Association for Feminist Economics. She currently serves as the associate editor with the Journal of World Development and Feminist Economics. She earned her PhD in economics from Harvard University and a BA in economics from Cornell University. And she is originally from the Netherlands, and she is the mother of 3 and an avid runner. Well, it's nice to know that you have got it all well-rounded, Yana, but what an impressive background, and so grateful that you could be here and share your knowledge with us today. So tell us a little bit before we jump into the conversation about your background in world studies and world economics. And can you talk to us about what a feminist economist is?
Yes. Well, going straight to the second part. In decades and decades past, mainstream economists tended to focus mostly on what happens in the marketplace and ignore many economic-related activities going on in the home that are unpaid. And they often ignored issues about gender relations and how women are treated. So the field of feminist economics came about to shine the spotlight on work that happens that does not pass through the marketplace and work that's predominantly performed by women. And they also, we also looked at gender relations and discrimination and social norms and other constraints that women face that affect how much they can participate in the paid labor force. So we really look at these interactions between what happens in the home and what happens in the workplace, and also, how women are treated. And I know you've done some work yourself, Helen, on, on sex bias, sex discrimination, and other poor forms of treatment, both of women and children, and how that affects families and women at work. So you know exactly what I'm talking about. So yeah, this is what feminist economics does, and I've been, a part of this field for a couple of decades now with my research.
I appreciate you sharing that with our viewers, and I'm even more appreciative that we have this level of focus, specifically around the feminist piece of this, because it is different, and there are other considerations, and if we're not taking them into account, then we really can't address and support women's needs properly. So, although I feel like everyone should understand this, but let's start with the basics. what is the wage gap? And, why is it still here after all of this time?
Exactly. Well, in the U.S., women earn, I think the current, it depends on which numbers you look at, I think it's around 81% of what men earn. And today, Equal Pay Day is, the 24th day of March. This is the additional number of days women would have needed to keep earning more in order to catch up to what men earned in the year 2020. And this is the average for all women. It's even worse for women of color. So Equal Pay Day for Black women is later on in 2021, and it's even later for Hispanic women. So we do have a gender wage gap in the US and in most countries in the world. There's just a few exceptions. I think the Philippines is one of them. And one of the main reasons in the US is actually having children, that women tend to be in jobs that have some more flexibility, or if they do leave the workforce for a little bit and come back later, they come back to lower paying jobs. There could be some discrimination going on or tracking. It's a combination of reasons. But it's generally referred to as the mommy tax or the motherhood penalty in various forms, because there's still this norm that men are the breadwinners and women take care of the children. It's reflected in the wage gap.
And, what's so interesting about that as well is that, all women don't have children, right? But nonetheless, all women, are impacted by this, which I appreciate you sharing the label of this, mommyhood tax for sure. So, and it's interesting to hear about the Philippines. It makes me curious what they're doing differently there for us to replicate.
Yeah. One thing, they do have higher rates of educational attainment for girls and for young women than boys and younger boys. So the Philippines was very quick to close the gender gap in education compared to many other countries. But it is more of an egalitarian society, and women have great occupations. So some years, again, it depends on exactly how the calculations are done, but the Philippines has reported gender parity when it comes to wages.
It's very interesting, really. So for our viewers who are watching, and we share these statistics all the time, but it's important to keep sharing them because they are really, eye-opening. So what is the difference? Why do we have such a difference? And what is the difference between white men, Black women, and Latinx women? And, what in terms of that wage gap? And what can we do to help change that difference?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's been so much research done on this, and there's several different reasons. The main one in the US, again, is this motherhood penalty and the kinds of occupations women have compared to men. And some of that's due to having children. Some of that is, it could be due to some discrimination or tracking or opportunities. The education gap is pretty much closed in the US. That no longer explains the wage gap like it used to. But a big reason, again, is different occupations that men and women choose, and that women and men in minority groups choose. That accounts for it. And some of it is taking some time off for some women, to stay at home with children. So there's a number of reasons that do explain the wage gap. And I think ways to address it, the biggest one would be to close or to change the constraints that women face in this care burden, that they are still doing most of the childcare at home. That's changed a bit with this pandemic. I know we're going to talk a little bit about the pandemic, but the work that women do at home, the disproportionate work, is a big constraint in their ability to advance in their careers. to pass the glass ceiling, to get the kind of jobs that they want that require, 9 to 5 or 8 to 6 FaceTime plus commuting. It's hard to do that with young children at home. So I think the main thing we need to change is employers need to provide more flexible kind of policies, job sharing, flex time, more working from home like we've been doing in the past year and a half. And these will help women as well as men to manage this overlap between their paid work and their unpaid work and the need to provide care. You're muted, Helen.
Thank you. I know we're trying to keep feedback away. You mentioned the pandemic, you mentioned the time that we're living in right now, and, that layer on top of what existed before, we entered into COVID times. Can we talk a little bit about, obviously we saw a staggering report come out in December, from the Department of Labor, and now we've seen even more information come out more recently, that is just putting even more of a spotlight on these issues and the impact on women, specifically, and women of color, even more so. Can you talk a little bit about that impact of this time, and then we can go back and look at it more holistically for going forward?
Yeah, I think some startling numbers were for December 2020, that in looking at the decline in employment, it was completely accounted for by women leaving the workforce. All of the employment declines in December were women's job losses, and the main explanation for that is women leaving the labor force completely. It's not even that their jobs ended because their businesses closed. It's that they've had to leave, and the main explanation is that they need to stay home and take care of children because children have not been in school. Is one of the main reasons. Elder care and care for the disabled is another, but it's mostly child care, and just somebody needs to stay home with the kids when they're not in school, and that work is often handled by women, single mothers, as well as opposite sex partnered parents. Disproportionately women are doing that work. So that's what's happening. The global data that's coming out from the International Labor Organization is showing that the US is not alone, actually, that relatively more men, their employment losses is explained by their jobs ending because of business closures, but more for women, it's that they're leaving the workforce completely. So it's happening in other countries also. And one thing I did want to add, I've done some research now with some colleagues at my center at Rutgers, the Center for Women in Work, as well as the Center for Women in Business. And we did a survey of about 1,000 people across the US, where we looked at the time spent at home as well as time in work. And we showed that it has increased for both men and women. So men are also spending more time doing childcare, elder care, disabled care, housework, but the increase for women is greater than the increase for men. We did find unexpectedly a little silver lining, and that was that when men stepped up and did more at home, we see that positively affects women's paid job satisfaction and their paid job productivity. So men stepping up at home contributes to women's job productivity and job satisfaction, but it doesn't go in the other direction. So we may still be doing more at home that has no bearing on men's job productivity or satisfaction. So we thought that was interesting.
That is very interesting. And it's also interesting because so many of the programs that, I see being put in place, and ours included, at the YW too, are so focused on supporting women and helping them get resources and mentorship and coaching and all these pieces. But there's not a lot of them looking at impacting the behaviors of men. But it sounds like that there's work to be done specifically focused on that area so that, we are working both halves, both sides to be able to get to the best end product for women and closing the wage gap for sure.
Yeah, and I should have mentioned that too, given the programs you just mentioned from the YWCA, I think leadership training programs, mentorship are all hugely important to give women more leadership skills to help them break through that glass ceiling as well. And, a lack of female mentors in higher up levels is another reason, for both the occupational differences between men and women, as well as the pay differences. So even things like learning how to bargain for higher salary packages can also help to close that gender wage gap.
Well, it's interesting. Actually, our conversation on Friday of this week is actually talking a little bit about that specific piece for our viewers. So you should definitely tune in and join us, because we know that women are just not wired to, for lack of a better word, brag or promote themselves, in the same way. And that really does impact their ability to access jobs, to salary negotiate, to interview, to write their resumes, their cover letters, to pitch themselves. And, we that is something that we really need to work on with women currently, and to raise young women, with a different mindset so that they are, operating in that way.
Yep, I agree.
So, and it's also so interesting that you're mentioning about mentors and leadership too. We are, being that it's Women's History Month, Yana, the YWCA of Northern New Jersey right now has been hosting our Women's Leadership Conference in a little bit of a different format this year, obviously, with what's going on. And we've been having these virtual conversations with, four, very impactful women leaders in our state, Dr. Chris Purnell, Janine LaRue, Dr. Balpreet Graywall Burke, and tonight, Rachel Antonoff, who's a fashion designer. And the three that we've spoken to date all talked about mentors and leaders and coaching, as being so impactful in terms of them being able to move ahead in their goals. And specifically and especially for the three women we've spoken to, all being, BIPOC women, and that the impact that had in terms of, helping them deal with some of the specific challenges that they dealt with because of their life experience.
Yeah, those are great people, those names that you mentioned, fantastic. And again, I think it's wonderful that the YWCA is pursuing this from so many different angles, but providing these kind of opportunities. And, and you and I both know it's also important for men to serve as mentors as well, that can be invaluable, to have men allies for women's aspirations to move ahead in their careers.
Absolutely, and especially in the careers, that are women are working in that are untraditional for women, when there aren't female mentors and coaches and leaders in those areas, to be able to support the women rising in those areas, that we really do need to look to men to be able to spend time in that space to be able to cultivate and support women's growth, and helping change what those opportunities look like for women.
Exactly. Another thing I like about mentorship programs is that the mentors can also learn from each other. I've been a mentor in a number of programs, and I learned so much from my co-mentors. Things like learning how to say no, because I think women are asked to serve more on committees and to do other kind of service positions because they need women's representation on these committees. So learning from other mentors how to say no gracefully, without negative repercussions, has been a particularly valuable lesson for me from other mentors.
Absolutely. Well, it's so interesting talking about all of these pieces, and then thinking about all the research and the studies that you all do, in your work at Rutgers. There seems to be so much that we know, and we need to act on. We need to mobilize and act on. So one of the headlines that we've seen a lot of really has been around women dropping out of the workforce, right? And you know, what should we be doing, right, to be able to impact all of what we're talking about in terms of programs, and needs that need to be, infrastructure that needs to be built and put in place to be able to shift this. When you think about your studies and the work that you're doing and what you're identifying, how does this translate? Obviously programs like ours are trying to put initiatives in, but on a broader scale, what are some of the pieces that you would like to see put in place to really be able to impact what we're talking about?
I love your use of the word infrastructure. And I'm going to add to that, I say we really need to build the care infrastructure. And I had mentioned a few minutes ago the importance of employer policies, but I think even bigger than that is the urgency of government policies, state government, as well as our national government, to really build our care infrastructure. And this latest, enormous stimulus package that the Biden-Harris administration just passed is a huge step in the right direction, with the child tax credits and the supports for lower income households. And we are moving in the direction of a federal paid family leave program. I'm optimistic that we'll finally have one after many years of the U.S. being one of the only countries in the world not to have paid parental leave. I think we'll finally get there given the new administration. And there's also now talk about more investment in child care provision, universally available child care that's either free or low cost, as well as more investment in long-term elder care. And that's also part of the care infrastructure that we need. So I'm really going to build up on that word that you use, the infrastructure, and say we need to invest in care infrastructure. And most of that is happening through the government.
Yes, and our viewers, who were with us on Monday, we had Seal Zalkind on from ACNJ, and we talked extensively about the state of childcare here in New Jersey and some of the, wonderful moves that we've seen, especially in this budget cycle, to try to really make some positive impact there, in addition to what's happening nationally, that, we are at the cusp of potentially, seeing some of the true systemic change that we know that we need, in this area. But for our viewers, the only way we're actually going to see it pushed all the way through is through action and through all of us to get involved. Yana is sharing what we know, and grateful that we have entities like the Rutgers centers that are doing the research and the studies to prove what our hypotheses have been for so long, but now that we know it, and now that we are starting to see some action in this way, we have to be making phone calls, writing emails, sending letters, attending rallies, and getting involved in advocacy groups and lending our voices, organizing all of the people in our lives to be able to support these efforts, because it really is the only way that we will build and change the systems that we have and put the infrastructure. I love care. Together we made a great, a great visual for everyone, a care infrastructure in place, to be able to make these changes so that we no longer are having equal pay days, to talk about this wage gap that exists, and that, we have moved ourselves to be a society more like, that we don't have these disparities that are just, plain old not fair. Forget everything else that goes with them.
I agree. I think advocacy is hugely important, because that's what puts the pressure on our representatives in Washington, D.C. and in Trenton to, pass the policies. And New Jersey is one of the leaders when it comes to progressive social policies and progressive labor market policies. And I think Washington, D.C. is sometimes following New Jersey in terms of what we do. So advocacy, both at the state level and the national level, can only help. And I would add to that, and something that will also help to close the wage gap is a movement towards a higher minimum wage. Unfortunately, that did not make it in this final stimulus package that was passed, but we have gone in that direction in New Jersey, where we are going up to $15 an hour, and many other states and localities are as well. But at the federal level, that's just not happening. And more women than men earn at the minimum wage or slightly above. So research has shown that an increase in the minimum wage would help to close the gender wage gap. So I would say if people are looking for a cause for advocacy, I think raising the minimum wage is one of those. Kind of as a fun note, about a year and a half ago, there was an event at Rutgers Newark for having the minimum wage go up to $15 an hour. And Jane Fonda came to that event. Wow. And a couple of our staff members at the Center for Women in Work had the chance to interact with Jane Fonda, because she's been an advocate of the $15 minimum wage push.
Well, and it's wonderful when people of that stature take these issues under their wing, because it definitely amplifies, the need, and, puts attention to a conversation that, you can't pay for any other way, you can't afford. So that's wonderful. So again, for those of you watching, here's your to-do list for today. These are 3 actions that you can take for equity. Remember, this is for all the women, that are in our country, and specifically for BIPOC women, for people of color that are hurt most by this wage gap, and also by what has occurred right now during the pandemic that has resulted in this economic crisis that has existed before, but has been, amplified in unfortunate record numbers, over this last year. So you can help by, again, I always say this, your responsibility doesn't end in November. After you put people in office, you're not done until next year, or, next big election cycle. They work for you, and on a regular basis, you need to, like happens in your regular workplace or in your family structure, you have to tell people what you want so that they know. And if you don't do that, then they will do what they want. And that may or may not, be aligned with your value system. So please urge Congress to raise the federal minimum wage, to pass the Paycheck Fairness Act and the Family Act, and stay abreast. And the YWCA of Northern New Jersey will be sharing action alerts with you. We'll be doing them. Actually, you'll be having one today specifically around this, about why we take action. YW, we take action, and we want you to do that today, and to be watching these issues and chiming in with all of your representatives on them over time. Yana, thank you so much for sharing your insights on these areas, and digging a little deeper into this conversation with us. And, there are so many of us that are, not only working in the individual space about how we can make a change, but collectively in groups. There's so many wonderful women's organizations, and we all work together as well. And as well as in our own space individually, we link arms, to be able to make change. But there are so many areas for focus that we highlighted in this conversation. So I encourage those of you watching to share this conversation with people in your life. It's important. That's what YWTV is all about, amplifying messages. And that really happens also because of you. So please send, take a copy of this link and send it in your messenger to someone who you think it would impact and help, that can help. You can also send it, share it on your Facebook page, copy it, send it in a text or an email. It's wonderful to, whether, it's your faith-based organizations, whether it's your volunteer organizations you're connected to, whether it's something through your profession, some kind of group that you think could have impact. and individually with your family. I know we're getting ready for Passover and Easter holidays. Families gather. These are good conversations to be having and ways to help people feel empowered during this time that they can make a change. And with that, I also want to share, we'll be posting a action alert also this week, tomorrow morning, that will be talking about some organizations that's coming together, some opportunities. One, I believe, on Friday evening, and also an opportunity over the weekend to come out and support the women and hear and learn more about the issues at the Edma Mahan Women's Correctional Facility and ways that we can support the women there. Our intent at the YWCA is to not only educate you, but to mobilize you. We've got a lot of work to do for women in lots of places and spaces in New Jersey and in our country, and you are all key in making that happen. Tomorrow, we hope you join us for our viewers for our Share the Mic Now. As you know, on Thursdays, we offer this platform to Black women in our community to amplify their voices. So we hope you can join us then. And again, as I shared, as Yana identified in our conversation, and on Friday, we'll be talking with Sandra Bleckman, who is part of the YWCA Northern New Jersey's Next Chapter team that focuses on helping women get back to work, whether they're unemployed or underemployed, specifically impacted around this time of the pandemic as well. And we'll be talking about ways to brand yourself, market yourself, and push your out your strengths and talking about yourself, whether it's on your resume, whether it's on interviews, whether it's through salary negotiations, networking events, just being able to help highlight the positives in what you have to offer. So with that, again, this evening, if anyone hasn't done it yet, please register to join us for the last of our Women's Leadership Conference conversation series. I'm so excited to be talking with Rachel Antonoff tonight. She's a fellow Jersey girl and fashion designer. And we have so much to be talking about her work, her interest in social justice. And there's no charge. You just have to register through our website, and you'll be included in the Zoom link to join us. As well as you know, we are helping women grow their voices and be part of our journaling workshop. We have another one also this evening. It's free of charge. We have a wonderful volunteer, Rachel Brenner, who has been leading this workshop for us. So please consider that. And we have a new opportunity thanks to a grant that we have received through Coca-Cola that we're very excited to share. It's specifically for BIPOC women entrepreneurs. And it's part of the 2021 We 360 Business Essentials program. We now have a partnership with Eureka Biz, and all program participants will get access to a step-by-step course, plus the support of professional coaches, mentors, and entire community of entrepreneurs to use this online community and platform to help women entrepreneurs of color launch and grow their small businesses. So we do encourage any woman, there's no charge to join. BIPOC women, please visit our website and sign up. We have 20 spaces right now for that program that we are very excited to fill and give this opportunity to. Yana, thank you so much for being with us today. To our viewers, we thank you. We have so many links here in our comments for you, including all the programs I talked about, as well as how you can learn more about the wonderful work that's happening that Yana and her the wonderful team at Rutgers is doing, and ways that you can learn about it, follow it. They have great workshops. There was one yesterday through the Center on Business that so many great opportunities to learn, educate, and also get yourself to know how to activate and get involved. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Safe day.